Hi, thank you very much for joining me on another episode of Sounds Like Schmidt, a podcast for creative entrepreneurs looking to install tools and tactics, mindsets and methodologies to help them navigate their murky waters in their unknown world while on their hero's journey. Get your pen and paper out because this episode's a little bit of a note taker. We have Dr. Graham Norton on, and I don't know how to say this cool, but he dropped some serious knowledge. See, a little while back, I had taken a pretty serious bump on the noggin, and I had to go see a snap, crackle, and pop specialist to try to get my needle straight and my head screwed right side in. And that's when I met the dynamic duo of Dr. Graham Norton and Dr. Marie Battaglia, co-owners and operators of East Coast Chiropractic, as well as co-owners and operators of two beautiful little girls. That's right, it's a husband and a wife, a mother and a father, a practice and a business, a true family business. See, I'm a single fella and an entrepreneur, intoxicated with action taking. I love to break high goals down into tiny tasks with daily steps on a weekly planner. Time management, it's pure bliss. But I won't lie, I can turn into a bit of a sourpuss when my day, doesn't go as planned. I can get a little bent out of shape. I would take that energy, that bad juju, not bring that into my house, into my home, way past working hours. I bring work on a date like a bad third wheel, talking work over wine. See, when you're a partner or a spouse, making your living as a creator or an entrepreneur, it can be very difficult to let go of the monkey mind and step away from the work when you enter into your home. If I owned and operated a business with a wife, it would be the opportunity to talk shop would be just too tempting to resist. And as a parent, the idea that my perfectly planned day full of high priorities and urgent tasks would be one phone call away from a kid falling in a mud puddle at recess and needing fresh clothes, well, that's got my monkey mind banging the cymbals. So I was fascinated to sit down with Dr. Graham to find out how he navigates his world, being a husband and a father and a business partner all at the same time. Pay particular attention to how Graham chooses his words very carefully. There's a pattern. There's repetition of words like alignment and values and congruency. There's also well-defined principles that he lives his life by, and it's ever present in his use of language. And we chat about how our lives got turned upside down because of this pandemic, and how he was able to successfully pivot his practice during this forced pause. Dr. Graham breaks down his 4 pillars, or as he eloquently puts them, his 4 somethings, whatever you want to call them. Then we go into his daily non-negotiable routine of best habits, all surrounded by his quarterly goals and anchored by his core values. We chat about how he found love in the classroom. Your hearts will absolutely melt as he describes meeting Marie on their first date. We chat about how we can turn back the clock, reversing aging, teaching an old dog new tricks. That's right, we're reversing father time with our minds using neuroplasticity and neurogenesis. Then we go into how living out of alignment of our core values can cause daily stress in our lives. We go into the pursuit of perfection and growth mindsets versus fixed mindsets. We nerd out about self-help gurus and personal development, chatting Robin Sharma. And we go down the road of journaling and meditation. And in final, this real estate agent was absolutely fascinated to learn about our guest's decision to downgrade at 30. Yeah, they decided to buck cultural norms and social trends and forego the fancy house and the shiny white Instagram kitchen, deciding to sell it to the Joneses. Trading big for small, they wanted to experience life with less. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. I know that I did. Strap yourself in for another episode of Sounds Like Schmidt with our guest, Dr. Graham Norton. No, well, that's the world does not turn out the way the way you wrote it down on paper. I was one that always had.
But isn't that it though,
the
man?
next
Like
5-10 years planned out.
But it never goes the same. If I would have thought that what I'm doing right now is what I would be doing, I would have been shocked. It's completely different than what I had mapped out or planned, or, because I'm sure you do long-term vision planning too.
Yeah, big time.
But this is completely different, which always makes me rethink if I should be doing long-term visions. But it's 100% different.
Yeah, no, I agree.
For the good, though.
For sure. Like, because I've always been a planner. Like, always was long-term, even the short-term, and then it would bring it right down, right? But then it was like, bringing it into action or what have you. So like, yeah, I was definitely more of a planner in my youthful days, and now I've slowly transitioned into. I always liked action, but like it's now like I'm getting almost intoxicated by actually doing rather than just daydreaming about it, because I daydreamed for like a long time, and it's like, let's actually do it. I was going to play like the surface level with the actions and such. So, but yeah, like, so you're an entrepreneur, and as I am, so that's kind of like why we're here. Like, we have that same kind of connection on all that stuff. But entrepreneurially speaking, it's hard not to kind of ask you, one of the very first things is just like this like pandemic. I don't think we're supposed to say the dirty C word on the internet. I think they're watching that word. So during this like global pandemic that we went through, which everywhere in the world is kind of affected differently. Everywhere in Canada right now is affected differently. We are in a very nice bubble, nice in, relative terms, kind of compared to others. So how did the pandemic affect you, like personally, business wise? Like, we had to shift around there. What did you have to shift around?
It was kind of polar opposites of a lot of highs and a lot of lows. There wasn't a lot of in-betweens, because there was, overall, I would say there was more gifts than not. It was a great opportunity because, and I know it's not the same for everybody, so this is my experience, but the ability to press pause in your business is phenomenal. I mean, I would have never dreamed of being able to literally stop for almost 3 months, assess everything, really just deep dive into everything and figure out, is this what I want to do or not? Or from there, how do I restart it if I want to change it, which I did.
Right.
So in that respect, I think it actually allowed me to bring to fruition everything I essentially wanted over the last few years, but couldn't do because we had a full practice. We had our systems and procedures. Right. Everything was basically fine-tuned down to the minute.
Right.
So I couldn't stop my practice and completely gut it and rebuild it.
Yeah.
So for that, I'm extremely grateful.
Right.
For 3 months of no income, I'm not as grateful.
Right, because you, like me, self-employed kind of, right? Like,
yeah, we're a dual. So my wife obviously owns the practice with me.
Okay,
and, so we're a dual self-employed family.
Right.
And we didn't exactly qualify for many of the benefits that are out there. So it was a trying time, more so just because of the uncertainty. Yeah. You just don't know what's going to happen, how long it's going to take, what that's going to look like on the other end. So the lows were low. Yeah. Because you can't help but think, okay, is this it? Like, am I going to lose my business? Am I going to lose my home? Am my family going to be uprooted because we can't afford to make this happen?
Yep.
But then, over the months, there was that opportunity to calm that. It was always there at the back of the mind, but the opportunity, the same thing, just to actually settle down with family. And that's a common thread for a lot of people.
Right.
To slow down and actually just be present, enjoy. If you do have a family, like, just really immerse yourself with your kids and your loved ones and the environment that you live in. We became a lot more grateful for our home, a lot more grateful for the things that we did have, a lot more grateful for, the time that we're spending together. And ironically, for us anyway, our experience was that by the end of it, we were much closer as a family and much calmer. Because I know a lot of times, you have kids cooped up.
Calm from the storm. That's nice.
Yeah, we were connected. It was good. And it's carried on, which has been nice. Mm-hmm. So I'd say really, I guess for us, the biggest pivot has been we got to stop. We got to reflect on, okay, what are we living congruently with the values that we have? Do any of our values need to change, based on what we're experiencing? How can we protect ourselves going forward? But then the ability to kind of rebuild and change was huge, and I love it. Grateful for it.
Well, there's a few things I want to unpack there. I mean, you mentioned your wife, Marie, and your family, and and that you're dual owners of a company and self-employed. So I do want to segue there. But in terms of what we all just went through, and you put it very well in terms of like a forced pause. We were talking right before the podcast about how we were I was a planner, still am. Sounds like you were a planner. And you found the positive over. You were able to assess your business, which you wouldn't have because of how fine-tuned and we wouldn't have asked. No one would have asked for what happened to happen, and it's still happening. But you wouldn't have asked for that pause, but you probably were always hoping for a pause to reassess a business. I know as an owner, I've always like, it would be like to just shut it off.
Yeah.
So you were able, was that a quick transition for you, or was it oh gosh, how are we going to do this?
Question.
And then maybe one or two tactful, what did change? Like I'm on Zoom a whole lot more as a realtor. Mm-hmm. Very easy one to kind of, what potential improvements came out of this forced review of your company?
My interest had changed in how I wanted to deliver care, but because we were a full practice, that didn't necessarily allow me to do that. Even things for like the length of our visits. I tripled the length of our visits, which from a business perspective, I recognize is not ideal. However...
Why my eyes are wide.
Yes, because we didn't really actually alter our prices accordingly, but it was something for me, like my passion is neurology. All of my postdoctorate education is in neurology. Wow. But I had reached a point, a lot of our work was very movement-based, structure-based, which I know contextually speaking doesn't make a lot of sense, but just kind of remodeling spines, which is great, and it's still a part of what we do. But I had been wanting to integrate neurology more into the practice, but didn't really have a way to do it because of the physical infrastructure, our actual physical space,
right,
along with the timing constrictions that we had created.
Right.
So from that, I just had to take a good look in the mirror and essentially say, okay, well, what's more important to me?
Right.
Like there's margins in a business that matters.
Yeah.
But my stress had come from feeling that incongruency. And for me, integrity is, like, I don't know that word gets thrown around a lot, but integrity is everything. And I am extremely stressed when I feel like I'm not delivering what I should be, how I could be, when and where I should be.
Right.
So I guess the biggest change then was just remodeling our systems, our procedures, and how I deliver care so that, we kind of rebuilt our rooms. We brought in a lot more tools so that we could work on the vestibular system, the visual system. We could work on, kind of balance-based training, a whole bunch of different stuff so that we could deliver more brain-based care. Because for me, it's as simple as if you want to get to the roots, you have to understand the brain. And if we can work on the brain and the body at the same time, we get better results. And since integrating that practice, I've seen it. And I knew it would happen. That's why I wanted to do it, but we've been able to actually see people less visits and decrease the length of their care plans to be able to get better results. So for me, that's a win, not only for us, because then we can see more people, like different people, and help different cases, but then for people too, it's less expensive and it's it's a more digestible experience because it's not as time consuming. Wow.
Well, there's a few things that you talked about. The first thing is, and I think you talked about this once when we were chatting. As I'm your patient. I kind of knew before the pandemic. I kind of knew that you wanted to transition into a little bit more of the neurology, the brain based. If you're listening, we're going to get into that in a little bit. So I want to ask you specifically about those type of things. The other question I wanted to ask you before we get out and off this topic, the other thing that I thought I noticed change in your business, though, it was also the direction, because yours was kind of more neurology based. I know your wife, Marie.
Yeah,
it was more with infants and things like that. So was there any, and we'll go through that, but was there any specific change on that because of the pandemic? Did that?
Yep.
Okay, so you both had new directions.
Well, part of it was just the age of our second child.
Okay.
Marie was ready to return to work more significantly. So when we had originally started our practice, we worked together, and then we had our first child, and then Marie had stayed home with Zoe, which was fantastic. And then she kind of came back into my little practice again, but then her interest started to shift, and we always kind of felt like she was kind of always in my practice, which, she's equally as educated as I am and extremely talented, but didn't really have the vehicle for her to deliver what she wanted to her clientele. So we were able to kind of figure it out, because we had about a 400 square foot room that was at one time a movement room.
Right.
And that was where a lot of people did, kind of movement-based rehabilitation, et cetera, some postural rehabilitation. So we basically gutted that room and rebuilt it as it's essentially the perinatal and kids wing. So she's got her exam room in there. She's got her tables and all of the things necessary for her care. She deals a lot with like pre and post frenectomy, so tongue tie release, oral tissue work, like torticollis, like a lot of different things relative to. Funny word. Never heard
I'm not gonna lie, man. I glossed over for about 30 seconds. Like you're throwing some words out that I'm just like, whoa.
So helping babies' bodies work better where there's a little more ease. So she works with like there's a dentist. So
it's not
and a
scary
GP.
to use. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but like having your crack in your baby's neck, that's okay. Like
Well, that doesn't happen. So
Okay.
that's probably a good
Right.
conversation.
Okay.
There's a pretty strong misconception that children get adjusted the
Right.
way adults do. And I can't speak for every chiropractor, maybe,
Right.
but in our world anyways, it's extremely low force work.
Okay.
So it's just like sustained pressure that's very light, or same thing if it's working on oral tissues, like mouth tissues, if there's been like a tongue tie release, it's just to kind of help develop that and the skill set so babies can latch better, they can feed better. So obviously huge when they're young.
Wow.
And then same thing with perinatal care. She deals a ton with that. So that's just kind of like before and after baby life. So helping women through their pregnancies and after pregnancy as well, just kind of restoring the body, getting strong again, feeling good, and helping through some of those challenges of feeding and just the physical and emotional stresses that go along with bringing a child into the world and then having to figure out how to raise them.
Not a small task. Yeah, that's actually very interesting. I have questions, but it's not my area of expertise necessarily. But maybe, just maybe, we could have some information for if anybody is interested in that. We can potentially guide them. But I want to backtrack a little bit.
Sure.
You've been my chiropractor for I think it's been about 2.5 years. I had a pretty good bump on the noggin, which required me to come see you guys. And we got all that fixed up and, maintained. And I kind of want to get into that. But we connected on a few things. And for a while, we've been trying to have our coffee date. We got to do that. We got to do that. So naturally, when we finally say, yeah, let's do it, I decided to film it in the living room, 3 cameras. Let's just do a podcast.
Why not?
So even though we've known each other now for about 2.5 years, I actually don't necessarily know much about you.
Sure.
I have some idea. You grew up in St. John or you're in New Brunswick? No?
No,
I thought you were from...
swing and a miss. Good start.
Okay.
Just kidding.
Rock and roll.
Fredericton.
Oh, you were in Fredericton.
So I was born in Amherst, Nova Scotia.
Yeah.
We moved here when I was, I believe, 4.
Yeah.
And I've been in Fredericton up until I went away for school and then back to Fredericton after.
That makes sense. Okay. And so, childhood, growing up, like, what kind of shaped you? My question, like, when did doctor kind of become on your radar? Was it at a young age? And what are some of the things that made you, from your childhood?
Good question. I still to this day don't really know why I got into chiropractic.
Okay.
I knew very little about it. Originally I was going to go into dentistry. My dad was a dentist. I thought about taking over his practice. But frankly, it wasn't for me. I thought it was I didn't deal well with the blood and the surgical aspect. That wasn't for me. I really don't know why I got into it. I always had the idea, I think every doctor says is they wanted to help people, but it's true. You want to be able to impact people's lives and make a difference and also have a career that's challenging and rewarding. And I felt something in healthcare was going to be it. I truthfully don't know why I got into chiropractic. I got there, fell in love with it, and it's become essentially a life's passion. And I'm so grateful that I did find it, but don't know why.
And so that's chiropractic, but that, so you started your education where? What
UNB.
You were at UNB, and
Yep.
I'm going to go with that, but I already screwed up. So I said, all right, I'm going to let him tell me.
That's all right.
So you went to UNB, and then you went on, and I think was it Toronto or Ontario?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So you went there for med school.
Actually, it's a doctorate chiropractic degree.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when you went to Toronto, what was the university?
It's called Canadian Memorial Chiropractic College. It's a private school.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's where you found love in the classroom? Is that it?
Yeah, actually, our story is a little... So we met in September of the first year, and we were engaged in December.
You're
No jokes.
Seriously?
No, I'm dead serious. So
Was there
we've
some
known each other.
inside pressure there?
Not at all.
No?
Our families thought we were crazy.
No.
So after about 3 months, we got engaged right around Christmas.
Yeah.
And then a couple years later, we were married, and we've been married now 8 years and 2 kids. And
Wow.
yeah, I mean, she's my partner in business and life, and the best person that I know. And we joke about this, but like we knew 100%. First date was 100% sure.
Wow.
And was practically ready to propose at that point, which seems crazy, I know, but it was just right, and we knew it, so we rolled with it.
Wow. And so, I mean, how much of that is common interest, right? You guys, again, you're both there for the same thing.
Yeah.
Presumably she was hoping to have her own practice. Hey, makes sense to do it together. Or did you think you were going to be, did you think or want the option of working with?
Oh, always. We always wanted to.
Always did want.
We knew from when we our first discussions that we were going to open a practice together.
Wow.
Yeah. And I love being in business together. I know for some it might not work.
Right.
And it could be, a challenge. Marie and I are very different people, but share a lot of values. And I think that's what works. We balance each other out. We have, very different strengths and very different weaknesses, but because we're so consistent in our values, we're able to work together because we both understand where we want to go and how we want to do it. And we can kind of help each other through the process. But it's been a great experience. I love it. Wouldn't have it any different way.
Right.
But I certainly understand how that could be difficult for a lot of people. And it's hard sometimes when you get home. It's hard to separate that line because as a business owner in general, but then when you're owning the business together and operating the business together, there's always something to talk about.
Right.
About business.
So can I ask you about that? Because I'm a single fella and I come home and I cannot shut off, right? I'm always thinking. And both of you being essentially entrepreneurial in a practice, right? You've kind of, you're business owners of a practice. It's kind of, there's almost two things there.
Yeah.
But this is an entrepreneurial minded question, but it's also because you happen to be, married to your business partner. Where does that ability to come off? Like, do you have certain routines? Do you have certain structures? Do you have certain rules? You've talked about your values, but how do you become family when you've left the office?
Mm-hmm. And I'd be lying if I said that we've got this nailed down. Mm-hmm. It's certainly a work in progress. And I find the less stressed I become at the office, meaning kind of the more congruent everything gets, the less I need to mull it over at home. Mm-hmm. So when I felt like there were some incongruencies, I would just nonstop, because I'm a cerebral person to begin with, so it would just go and go and go, and I could never shut it off. And there was a couple of years that were tough because I recognized hey, this isn't where I want to be, but didn't see a way to change it. Mm-hmm. So it became a pattern where I just was nonstop thinking about it. But it's gotten a lot better. We obviously have, with the kids too, it was harder for us to have focus time together, mm-hmm. but we make rules now to have regular dates together. We also have other common interests, so it's easy just to make sure exercise together. We train together. Mm-hmm. So there's other things to talk about and other things to focus on. And mm-hmm. there's the kids obviously too. So we try to, cross that line when we go home and pull in the driveway. That's it. We're home now and shift to now it's dad or spouse and not, doctor.
So the entrepreneurial question, because I'm going to come back to me, single fella, and I just only think about my business.
Yeah.
And I won't lie, I'm intoxicated with action taking these days, and humble brag. I'm doing the work of 3 different jobs right now, mm-hmm. But I think in my head, I'm like, okay, this is the direction, and I'm only thinking more and more and more. A relationship, one thing. Okay, how do I massage that into it? Kids, how do you grow as an entrepreneur? How do my friends, they come back for their jobs and I hear, I'm too tired to do this or that. Mm-hmm. I'm exhausted, this and that. You have to maintain a bit. You have to see in the future. You have to be able to forecast. You have to be able to put financial resources, your mental health, essentially, in terms of seeing the direction where you want to go. Mm-hmm. We just talked about stopping so you can have quality time with your wife. But how do you manage growing a family when a 2-year-old could just just like that, completely change that. No, you're not doing that important thing today for work because I just knocked my tooth out.
Yeah. And you know what? I'm not a huge fan of when I see the interviews and people like lay out their perfect plan and it all works, because it's messy. Yeah. It's been super hard.
Yeah.
Like I don't want to ever give that misconception that, oh, I've got it all figured out and everything's gravy and it's smooth. It's a mess all the time.
Yeah.
And the first few years were extremely difficult. And was it last year? My time frames are all messed up. But
no,
I guess it was 2 years ago. Was when our youngest was born. I took on way too much and practically put myself in the hospital because I burnt myself out so much, and the stress was so through the roof that I could barely function. And I was like, I'm going to sell my practice. Like, I'm done.
Yeah,
I was done.
Wow.
So it hasn't been smooth, like at all. But the biggest thing that's helped is just persistence. Mm-hmm. You know, it's literally about, I know what my values are, and I know what the action steps are that are going to help me fulfill those values, so I feel good about my life. So I just try my best to do those things. Right. And I know that seems trivial, and oftentimes it doesn't happen. Like the last 2 weeks, like I've had, my stomach's been a mess. Right. We kind of talked about that earlier.
Yeah, you get the IBD, right?
The joys of stomach issues. So I've had a flare up, and like I haven't exercised once, and I can't keep food down. I've lost like 9 pounds, and so it has not been good. It's been really frustrating. Wow. I'm struggling to show up for my family. Practice is a grind right now. Mm-hmm. Not fun, not smooth. Right. But I recognize that it's not always going to be like that. There are good times and there's not so good times. So when things are really bad, I just try to at least make sure that I'm checking off the box for my values. So for something for my health, something for my family, something for my business, and something for my financial security. It just might be really, really small. So instead of doing 2 hours on my trainer on the bike, I literally might walk around the block. But I'm still checking that off as a win, and I'm going to be okay with it. But having some grace.
You have certain pillars, certain tenets in your life that you just make sure that on a daily basis, weekly basis.
They're kind of my non-negotiables, unless I'm like struggle busing to the max.
Can I ask you about what these non-negotiables are? Like, are these based on your values, like family for So do you have certain little boxes that you like to check?
So I kind of like I'm sure you have structures too. I kind of separate things into quarters. Mm-hmm. So my daily non-negotiables are always relatively simple. It's like hug my family, do my 5-minute journal, which is a gratitude journal, which is awesome. Yeah, it's a morning and evening journal. 60 ounces of water minimum a day. Okay. My supplement regime, daily. Make sure I read. Make sure I meditate. Okay. And that's kind of like an exercise movement. Like that's the daily non-negotiables. However, some of those, like I've had to realize, okay, it's not always going to be maximum execution. I'm grinding it out. And you see people like portray that, like suffer, like the David Goggins, which is fascinating, right? But I'm not that tough. So I'm happy if it's like, great, I at least checked off the box and did something to better myself, or at least stay consistent with it. From a quarterly perspective, I kind of have different quadrants. Like I've got, connection. So there's somebody like a relationship I want to nurture. Okay. So right now that's with my 2 daughters. So I kind of have my action steps for that. Okay. Then, contribution. So how I'm basically able to better the world. And it's usually for me, that's through my education. I do a ton of continuing ed. And then there is like my own physical conditioning and my own, well-being. So that's an exercise related goal. And then just one for my own mental well-being and kind of how I can nurture that as best I can. So I have kind of like my quarterly little map. I have those things, but I want the goal that I'm working towards, and I check in daily and regularly and do my best to stay on top of it. But I think with kids and then the business and everything, I've also learned that not every day is going to be golden, and it's okay to fail. It's okay to miss a few. I used to wallow in it and just be like, oh, geez, we'll throw it out the door. Yeah. And now I just say, okay, well, it's a bad day. I'll get back on it tomorrow. Oh, it was bad for that. Me
too. Dude, I want to, because you called them quarters. I pictured a circle. Robin Sharma, I'm a big fan of him, and he has the 4 interior empires, right? And he calls them heart set. I'm going to try to do mindset, heart set, health set, and soul set. Yeah. And so you started with connections, so wife, kids. I'd probably call that in your heart set. You then talked about continuing education, contribution, I think is the way you said. Probably put that in the mindset. You're studying, you're learning. Yeah. You talked about a physical, your actual body, maintaining that you have your personal energy. That's kind of the health set. And then you said something about yourself, like there was something,
kind of my own personal
your
growth.
own personal growth.
So that could be spiritual.
Spiritual,
sure.
Exactly. So to try to tie that all up, you've kind of recognized that you had these 4, you call them pillars or non-negotiables,
Yeah,
or
call them whatever you want.
Yeah,
4 somethings.
Yeah, the 4 somethings, and that's kind of connected with that. So that's really cool.
I think you know what, like one of the things too, just I've been reflecting on this lately, especially over the last couple of weeks, where I've been kind of struggling with my health, and it's been annoying. Is that I've also accepted that the path I've taken and chosen is never going to be easy. I, for a long time, thought I would get to this point in my life where everything was going to be easy and I was going to make it there. And then I reached some of those goals, and then you just realize there's new problems and there's new challenges, and they're often harder because they're, pushing the boundaries of who you are and what you're capable of.
You just pushed yourself to this limit. How is it not going to expand and get more complicated?
Exactly. So I held on to that for a long time, though, and I think that's why I struggled with the challenges in the first few years. Was kind of like, great, this is hard. When is it not going to be hard?
There was some line in the sand that
you
drew.
Make it.
You're going to do that, and then once that,
yeah, oh man, it was pretty hollow.
Golden.
Actually, once I got there, because I was like, oh, well, this is no different than the day before. So now what?
And I know this is a crazy thought because biologically it makes no sense, but I just keep telling myself I'm getting younger. Right? Like I tell myself that all the time, like I'm getting in better health. I actually believe I'm about to get in even better health. And I hear all my friends say, oh, that's what happens when you get old. That's what's happening. And I hear you say that. And so I actually try to correct my friends and say, well, maybe you just don't need to say those words because you're then telling your body. Is all that foo-foo? Or does that kind of make sense to you on a scientific level of?
I think more what happens is as people get older, they appreciate their functionality and health more, so they become more cognizant of the decisions they're making.
Good answer.
So I think people can get healthier as they get older because they maybe weren't too healthy to begin with. and
Touché,
that's just, so it's
salesman.
kind of like, hey, you know what? I got to shift gears. But that being said, of course, like if you're young and you've stayed in exceptional health, but your mindset changes too, right? The older you get, the more typically you're training for health and for life as opposed to sports specific, because fitness isn't always synonymous with health. And a lot of people who are training for sport specific, repeat motions, tremendous amount of physical load and volume, when that's day in, day out, that isn't necessarily good for you and doesn't always end well. So sure, you might be in good cardiovascular health, but what do your joints look like? Have you created a whole bunch of imbalances because you've been doing the same thing on the same side of the body year in, year out? Have you overtrained? And when you're young, when I think of my sport days, I wasn't doing mobility and recovery and, stability work and brain-based work. I would basically go play sports, even when it was at my most competitive. And then after, go to a fast food restaurant with the team and then go home.
I do that Tuesdays and Thursdays after beer league hockey.
There you go. That's funny.
So I can get healthier is what you're saying.
There's always room for improvement.
There's always room for improvement. I love that bit. So a couple things I wanted to chat with. So I want to nerd out now with you because there's like a bunch of things that you mentioned that. But so at the end there, we were chatting about that line in the sand, because I always drew a line in the sand as once I'm here, that would be. Simon Sinek has a book, The Infinite Game. Are you familiar with that?
I don't know that one.
I haven't even read it myself, but it's been recommended. I know the concept, just the idea that there is no finish line. And guess what happens?
Right.
John Maxwell. Guess what happens when you cross the finish line?
There's a new finish line.
Well, he says you're finished.
Okay.
Right. So when you cross the finish line, how many times have I crossed a goal and immediately shut down all pursuit of the next level of the goal? Typically, I'm thinking working out. So, all right, getting back in health. 3 months later, I look pretty good naked, and I shut it down. Right? Like it's whatever I need to do this, and so my question to you to talk about this for the second time though is, do you still find yourself drawing absolute lines in the sand, Or do you find yourself now, where I am, is finding love in the process of the pursuit of these goals or ambitions, etc.?
It usually depends how much sleep I've had. Anyway,
Speaking
as
like
much
a father.
as much as that's a joke, there are days that I'm just like, come on, if the kids are up, we don't birth good sleepers. So like we didn't sleep through the night, and this is common for a lot of parents, but for about 4 years of being up multiple times a night, and that takes its toll, right? And I think at that point I was just clutching to like, oh, if only I could get to here, like I'll be all right. And I think that was part of it. It's just we were so sleep deprived for so long.
So get to here, was that we just need your youngest is not Zoe,
She's
Eloise.
2. Yeah.
So you just needed her to be 5, and once she's 5, it'll be okay. Is that what you're
Our
telling
oldest
me?
didn't sleep through until she was almost 4.
Right.
But our youngest, thankfully, she gets up at like 4:35, but she at least sleeps till then.
Okay.
So we've become accustomed and adapted to that. So that's better. But
So what about the process? Have you started to pursue the process more than?
yeah, and I think the only reason I say that is like your judgment always gets clouded when there's more stress and more load on your system, right? So if you find yourself not necessarily being able to adapt particularly well to the demands on your plate, like, here's your demands, here's your resources, I don't enjoy much anything,
Right.
So process or no process, it's just like, come on, like, let's just get through this.
Right.
But as we're coming out of that and there's a little more stability, like we're sleeping and, that type of stuff's happening. Yes. It's more of like, okay, I can actually follow through in this routine. I can enjoy it. And there's certainly some things where there is a line in the sand, like certain things from a business perspective, like, hey, you know what? I know that our business needs to generate this. That's a line in the sand, but
Right.
that's a very tangible kind of concrete specific. But as it pertains to, life, yes, enjoying the process more, trying to get less focused on the outcomes. And then I appreciate the outcomes more because they are what they are. But knowing that I've delivered my best in the process gives me peace on the outcome end.
We chatted a lot about grit, Angela Duckworth, and growth mindset, Carol Dweck. And I think it was Carol Dweck's, I hope I'm saying that right, but her book, Growth Mindset. And they even talked about kids and about rewarding the effort and not rewarding the results.
Yeah.
And it had huge, both obviously personally, but then growth of children.
Yeah.
So anyway, I get quickly, like a growth mindset. Do you find that, because there's some people when I ask, kind of that whole we're getting old, I find there's fixed mindsets and then there's people that still think they can grow. Like entrepreneurs typically at, what are you, 32, 33-ish? You're still in a mindset of, I want to learn, I want to grow, I want to build.
Yeah.
And not zero judgment and not saying everybody, but there's some people that are like, this is, So growth mindset, do you have any kind of thoughts about?
I love it, actually. So I would, in the past would have described myself as fixed mindset.
Okay.
When I was introduced to that book, Mindset, from you.
So you read it?
Oh yes, it was great actually. It was a bit of a game changer. I think the biggest thing is just gives you permission to be terrible at things, knowing that if you put in the effort and the actual work, that you will get better, and that's part of the process. And it's not an indication of
Talent,
your quality as a person.
Right.
So I think it allowed me to separate my issues with needing to perform and needing to always look like I have it together, with just knowing, hey, you know what? Show up, do the work. That's okay.
Right.
Nobody gets there
Right.
without putting in the work and having a whole bunch of failures and messes along
And
the way.
teams around them.
Yeah, so I've actually found it really helpful. And I still notice there's places in my life where there's more of a fixed mindset. But overall, I think like anything, it's a practice. I think growth mindset is just like meditation. It's a practice. And the more I practice doing it, I can become better at it or catch myself if I'm slipping into more of a fixed mindset.
Well, I'm not going to segue into meditating quite yet because you mentioned that earlier, so I do want to ask you that. But just real quickly, you mentioned that you're not sure where the idea of chiropractics came, when you wanted to do that, but that's the route you went. But you said that your area of expertise is in neurology. Was there a connection in realizing before you went to chiropractics that there is there's a neurological and a chiropractic, or was that when you were in the world of chiropractics and you were interested in the brain and you realized that those two could come together?
Yeah, I guess for me, it didn't come until I was introduced to chiropractic. Chiropractic's always intertwined with the nervous system. As simple as if you're going to work with the spine, it has to influence the nervous system, the brain. You really can't separate them. Okay. And the brain very heavily influences the spine. So I think what happened though is from a core education perspective, our schooling in neurology was good, but our application ability to really kind of bring it into a practice was so-so from a base education perspective. So it wasn't really until I started doing additional post-grad training that I really kind of found, wow, there's a lot we can do for people. And for me, it just kind of made sense. If we're going to be looking at spines and trying to facilitate the best spine possible, we need to work with the things that are going to influence most heavily.
Right.
So it just became, for me, like my obsession is results. Like I want to do literally, it's not the best business model in the world, but I want to be able to do everything I possibly can to help somebody get from point A to point B. Like that's
as fast as possible.
Yeah, that's what turns my crank, and I love that. And it's constant, and I recognize it's going to be a lifelong process. And I get excited to think sometimes, where am I going to be in 10, 15 years? Because that's just it's a never-ending process of getting better, right, and then delivering that to people who need it, which that's exciting.
So fantastic. So your interest is in the brain, and I'm starting to become pretty interested in that. I do have a friend who's a doctor, and his specialty as well is in neurobiology. Mm-hmm. And I'm very new to this. Yeah. I read a book by Dr. John Ratty Spark or Rady. Are you familiar with that
Spark?
book? Spark.
My wife's read it, and it's sitting on our bookshelf.
Right there. So you're kind of familiar with...
Yes. Okay. And, how exercise affects the brain.
Exactly. So his, exercise specifically anaerobic, and this concept of neurogenesis and neuroplasticity. Now, I was mentioning this, and I'm not going to I'm not going to put him in a box, because he was a little bit standoffish on the idea of neuroplasticity and neurogenesis, but it was a Friday night, and I've read one book, and maybe I did not formulate my question quite properly. There's a very good chance of that. What is your thought? Because I'm hearing that this is such a new science. It's like less than 20 years, it's kind of like the gut health is so new to that. Is it possible that there's some people in the world of neurobiology that may or may not know or believe in neuroplasticity and neurogenesis? And where are your thoughts on one's ability, and maybe you can explain neuroplasticity and neurogenesis, but where's your thoughts on one's ability to tactfully change their brain for the better?
So I think we can look at the world and realize that there are people who are going to believe and not believe everything, it doesn't even matter how much science, how much proof, what's present. You're always going to have people who...
Fake news.
It's not hard. Like, look at the world, right? You can literally have a pretty strong array and heavy diversity, regardless of how much quote-unquote truth there is. But from my perspective, and the vast majority of scientists that are out there, 100% neuroplasticity is real.
So what is neuroplasticity? And what is neurogenesis? Can you...
So think of neuroplasticity as the ability to change the brain, form new networks, or degrade old ones. So you can have positive plasticity, which would be positive outcome relative to the changes you've had in your nerve pools. Mm-hmm. And you can have negative, where the things maybe aren't so good that are happening. Right. Plasticity really just means it's changeable. And by basically different amounts of stimulus and repetition and intensity.
So is this habits, routines, or is it thought processes?
Everything. A thought still changes the brain, right? You can't really dissociate it. So it could be body work. It could be something you're doing with your visual system. It could be exercises, movement patterns you're doing. Everything involves the brain. And it's really not hard to see it in day to day. If you were once a beginner at something and then you got really good, there's been a plastic change. Your brain changed.
So, that's plasticity. What about genesis? And maybe
genesis
this is where...
a generation of new nerves.
Right. Because your skin grows back. So
yes.
Are you getting new brain cells?
Of course you can build new brain cells.
Wow. And how... that new brain cell wasn't there before. So it doesn't know your past conditioning. So if you're firing in a new direction through time, you're generating new brain cells and they're living in this new you world of your, is this very simplistic?
Well, nervous systems are a little trickier in that, there's a tremendous amount of complexity, and even our understanding of it is still very, very minimal. And mine too. I'm not going to say that I'm a neuroplastic expert by any stretch, but we know that there's very, very complex webs of nerves within the brain that give function to the things that we do, and those nerve pools can be changed and they can be strengthened and they can be degraded and broken down, but it's really hard to do those things. So if you, for example, like we think habit change, well, habits are really hard to break. And part of that is because every time you do something and you do it again and again and again, you strengthen a pathway, a specific pathway for that habit you're doing.
Robin always says the wire together, fire together.
Right? Fire together, wire together. Yeah. So you stimulate it, you do it enough, it gets strong. So then your brain becomes accustomed to that. So trying to change that literally requires that, A, you're not going to fire it as readily, or you have to create new ones, which is also difficult. Very. But, it can be done, but it's certainly difficult. There's no doubt about that.
So thank you. At the very surface level, so I'm quite interested in learning more and more about that. But I've mentioned Robin twice now about the four interior empires, and now again the fire together, wire together. We're in the nerd out stage of this now. The personal development. I'm a big self-help guy, and Robin Sharma ended up being a pretty big influence in my life. Still is. And when I chatted to you, you seemed to kind of have an understanding of who he was, and you're kind of interested in this world. So, how into the self-help, look in the mirror, you go get them. Do you consume this content? Do you apply them in your life? What can you tell me about the world of personal development to you?
So I've invested in mentorship. That's something I've done, like actual personal mentorship and business mentorship. And from a Robin Sharma perspective, certainly read books, and I've done a couple of his online courses. So Extreme Achievement Formula. And then I believe it's called Robin Sharma Mastery Sessions. It was one of the earlier ones. I'm trying to remember, but it's the online modular courses. Yeah. And I found when I was just starting out, those things had a big impact. Right. Just because, when you graduate school, you're kind of in that transition where you're like, all right, it's on me now to really take control of my life and make it go somewhere. You're kind of lost. And I didn't really have a network at the age I was of like-minded people who wanted to grow and build and evolve. So I felt pretty lonely. And that was great to be able to just start to think of life differently, think of life as almost like a vessel to perform and do big things and things that you love. So I loved it. I thought it was wonderful. I've also had some experiences with mentorship that didn't go so positively. And I think it's a double-edged sword, just in that if mentorship is there to help you kind of explore yourself and really move towards your goals and what you want, great. If it's somebody else telling you do this because it works for me, so it's going to work for you, that's somebody else's life. And that has, for me, created a lot of stress and kind of contradiction in the past because I always felt like, well, this isn't really me, but I wasn't confident enough in myself because I was so inexperienced to do something different. So where I'm at now, I deal more with, I enjoy more personal mentorship and guidance, less business actually. Okay. And I found that's been really positive for me. But from self-help, I'm always learning. So that personal development is broad, right? It's not just kind of
self-education.
Yes. So always, never will stop that.
So that's big. You talked about reading. You just said you never stop that. So have there been any books that have come across your world that you can say, you know what, Graham, before this book and after this book, two different people? It's happened to me with a few books. So I'm just curious, is there one or two books that were like, wow, this changed the way I thought? And it doesn't have to be on business. It could be health. It could be relationships. It could be just how you speak to yourself. Is there anything that you can?
I've never been the type where I do one thing and it just kind of, boom, changes me on the spot. But there's ones over time that I think would have had a strong effect. Yeah. I think mindset would have been one of them.
Oh, wow. Okay, great. Yeah,
that was a really powerful one for me. A lot of people have heard of the classic 4 agreements.
The 4 agreements. Was that Paulo Coelho? No,
I think it was Don Miguel Ruiz.
Yes, Don Miguel Ruiz. Yeah.
But at the time, I appreciate it, but it's the application that changes you, right? So it took me many years to be able to start to withdraw myself from to do that. There was probably like a continuing education course for my career that had a significant impact on me really transitioning with somebody by the name of Dr. Michael Hall. He's just absolutely brilliant. And that for me, if I had to think of one thing, it was probably that, because it impacted just the way I looked at my practice, my business, my life, and how I could help people. And that's what kind of spurred me on my journey to change things.
Well, I'm excited about that. And you mentioned journey a couple times. We're going to get to that, but real quick, I want to dive in. We're pretty on the same page when it comes to like minimalism. Like kind of the idea of just having less and focusing on the most important. You talked about your values, and you have certain pillars, right? I'm a big proponent of minimalism now, both in my physical things, and that's where it started. But for me, once I started stripping away the stuff, I also started then having a mental strip away and realizing what are my priorities. And I actually now know my 5 priorities, which is now helping me with decision making. So what say you with minimalism? It's been a trend. It's kind of trendy, the minimalism documentary, Matt Diavella. I'm not sure did you ever see that on Netflix?
I did, yeah.
Awesome. So that's where it started for me. Do you have 2 cents on minimalism and how it might have, or essentialism, or is there?
Yeah, I guess for me, I don't know if I would label it as anything. It's more so just trimming the fat and getting more congruent with who I am and what I like. I kind of joke that like I'm extremely boring because I do like the same 4 things. I hang out with my family, I exercise, I go to work, and I learn things. Like that's pretty much all I do, which is
like
sometimes a tiny bit dull. Like, I'm like, boy, I should go and like do something fun, but that's kind of my core, who I am. So I don't really venture away from that. So to me, that's a form of minimalism in that it's just, I really just do those things.
Yep.
From a physical space perspective, we've, kind of had a journey, and we've talked about this before, just where I consumed, and I found for me when stress is really high, I would look to escape through material items. So built a house, it was a fancy house, got it, and really kind of appreciated that I was not one speck happier. If anything, I was less happy because it was really expensive and now I had to pay for it.
So what say you about that? Because I wanted to move from minimalism to downsizing, because this, I'm a realtor, and you didn't use me, by the way. So that's why
I didn't know you at the time.
Oh, I don't know. I think we were just, no, I'm kidding. Total tease, because Sam, we're big fans of Sam. Not common.
No.
For a young 30-year-old couple who probably do well financially, relatively, to go and get that nice white kitchen that everyone loves on Instagram.
Yeah.
And you actually looked around and said, this isn't for me. So I want to ask you about that. Like, why?
Well, I don't feel like I've downsized or downgraded. I feel like I've upgraded. We're in a much smaller house that's several $100,000 less, but I just feel way better. There's freedom. There's peace in that.
Is it just the money? Is it the money that made it easier?
There's space, right? Financially too. Like there's space. That's part of it. But I guess it just made so little difference in my life that it just seemed very unnecessary.
So
and there was other things
I
could use my money for and my mental space for, other than to live in a house. And that's just me. I know lots of people love their homes, and like my mom's like that. She loves her home. They have a beautiful home. She loves it. But I just found that, I'm glad I experienced it. I know Jim Carrey has a quote. It's like, I wish everybody come rich and famous and experience it. They can realize that's not what will actually make them happy.
Yeah.
And, that was kind of it. Like I feel really grateful that at age, I don't know, it was like 30 or 31, that I basically realized, nope, not for me.
And that was the 2 of you realized that, Maria,
yes,
as well.
It was a little harder for me because she like custom designed the whole thing, and it was really nice. Like it was a gorgeous house, but it never felt like a home. It just felt like something out of a magazine and
a showpiece.
Yeah, it didn't do anything.
Gotcha.
So for us, it was a great shift to just change
Gotcha.
and pivot.
Well, I want to ask 2 quick questions real quickly about journaling and meditating. You mentioned kind of like your ideally your non-negotiables, and there was some studying in there. There was some movement. There was some meditating. There was some journaling. Specifically, you talked about gratitude. I'm a big journaler. I do gratitude work. I do freeform and process emotion, and the next page could be my grocery list. Like I have a journal, and it's bullet journaling, which I quite enjoy and want to go into. But specifically to, you mentioned gratitude. What can you talk about? Like, has it helped? How do you kind of tactfully do it in a couple words, with your use of your journal?
Sure. So I use what's literally called the 5-minute journal. I've tried a bunch of different things, like you said, just kind of literally blank journal, process things, get it down on paper, tear it up, scratch it out, all the different things. But, for us too, like time is money, just in that in the morning with the kids and stuff, like I might only get a couple minutes and not really necessarily have that time to myself where I can just think and plug it down. So the 5-minute journal is actually like a journal. You can download the app or you can buy it at Chapters. Okay. I don't know, it's like $20-$30 or something. It's a hardcover. I like the hardcover. Yeah. And it's just like you start your day. It's like 3 things you're grateful for. There's a quote. There's 3 things you're grateful for. What would make today great? And then quick affirmations. It takes like literally 5 minutes. And then at the night, there's like a nightly review. So what went really well today? What could I improve? And then you wrap it up. So I've actually found that really easy because I can just sit down, plug it in, try to really kind of experience what I'm writing, and then close it up and go. It doesn't require a lot of time of me.
Right. And so real quickly, how long have you done that for? And what were the noticeable things that you at least went, there's some difference here?
I keep relearning the same lessons that I stop and start it. It helps. I feel more connected, more just, I go into my days feeling more grounded and more appreciative of the fact I'm going in to do things rather than stressed that I'm going in to do things. Mm-hmm. But then I stop doing it, and then I get stressed again, and then I do it again and say, oh yeah, that's right. This makes me feel better. Yeah. So I always do that.
Oh yeah. Well then, real quick, then meditating. Again, Robin's the one that got me in journaling, meditating, early morning rising, but meditating for me has been really, it's that, I heard that word for years and like, oh yeah, I'll do that one day. And no, I'm not sitting down cross-legged, not talking for 20 minutes. But I started it and I did it and I found benefits. What does your meditation practice look like? How do you do that with kids?
Yeah, well, I try to, I do it first thing when I wake up. Like it's the very first thing I do because it's typically a guaranteed time. Right. And I use the Calm app. There's like Calm, Headspace, there's Waking Up. There's a whole bunch of different ones. So I enjoy, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, it's structured. Minutes. You can track it. You can tag emotions with it too. They're typically only 10 minutes. Yeah. So I find for me, if I can create it just almost like an automated practice, it becomes simpler. So I do enjoy, rather than just I would never be able to just sit down. I shouldn't say never. At this stage of my life, I would find it extremely difficult to sit down without any guided meditation and just try to, slow down. That sounds horrific. But the guided meditations I find great.
Yeah, a little bit of soft music. Manageable. It's kind of, yeah. I really started, I sit down, close my eyes 20 minutes now, and it's not difficult anymore. Yeah. I'm not necessarily in a different universe like some people kind of say or maybe go. I feel a little bit aware of what's happening, but when I'm really into it, it can kind of get otherworldly.
Yeah, a little
drifty. So fantastic. So I want to start wrapping things up. I have a couple questions that I always like to end them.
Okay.
They're biggies.
Okay.
So this is the existential. But before we get into that, I first just want to thank you very much for being on
my pleasure.
The show.
Thanks for having me.
It's been a long time coming, our coffee date. So I'm very grateful for it. I appreciate it. I just want to say, if people are interested about chiropractic, if somebody lives in the Fredericton area and needs your services, or again, I don't know how much information you guys are trying to push out in terms of just a service knowledge for the community. How do people connect with you, your office, your wife, Marie, etc.?
Sure. The easiest way, honestly, is eastcoastchiropractic.ca. That's our website. It gives a general synopsis. We have an Instagram page, East Coast Chiro, or East Coast Chiropractic. My wife, I'm terrible at social media, I'll be honest. I actually try to stay off it purposefully. For me, I don't do well with it. So I believe it's East Coast Chiropractic. And then she has one called the Chiro for Moms. She has a ton of value and a lot of great stuff on there. Yeah. But yeah, website's probably the easiest way to find us.
Okay.
And we're pretty simple on how we work. Like if people have questions, call, ask. Well, you can talk to you on the phone just to get a general kind of idea where you're at. But we always start with a consult. It's just our opportunity to literally sit down, hear your story, and figure out if, it sounds like you might be a good candidate for care and move forward from there.
That's good. I'll make sure that all the links are right. Okay, so sure. I'll ask Marie what they are.
It's probably a good idea.
It's probably a better idea. And I really want to just, before I, real quick, I mean, we've known each other for a few years and you were my daughter, but one of the things that I started connecting with is because when I was in your office and looking around, I really noticed a level of care, attention to detail, granularity. So you're off the social media for a reason and this and that, and you high performance, et cetera. And I noticed that, and that's where the relationship came from. So I just want to acknowledge that as a user of your experience, it is top notch.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
It's not that I've been to many chiropractors, but in my industry, I see how I've performed or others perform, and you can kind of see average at times. And you are not average.
Thank
and
you.
Your business is not average. So I just want to thank you very much for all the help that you have given me on a personal health journey, because I got a lot. So now I'm going to, at the very end, said journey. You said journey twice.
Okay.
So I am trying to connect this podcast over time to the hero's journey concept. Are you familiar with the hero's journey?
A little bit.
I'm not. I just kind of, it's the rise and fall of the hero, right? And so I find that entrepreneurial creatives that have to go out there and make it themselves, we go through these rise and falls, and we feel them very hard. So I'm just on a personal level. Who are you trying to be, and what are you going to do? Two big questions.
Who am I trying to be, and what am I trying to do?
Yeah, what are you going to do? Meaning maybe a tactful.
So
could that be a business goal? Like for me, I'll tell you that I'm trying to be one of the larger providers of real estate service in Atlantic Canada one day. That's what that's what I'm going to do. And who I'm trying to be is what Dr. Tiffany Keenan talked about, being a beacon of light, like being able to attract people and show somebody, guide somebody. So that's who she's trying to be. So who's Graham trying to be, and what is he going to do?
Those are big questions that require a lot of thought.
On the
time,
spot.
which I don't have. You know what? Realistically, it's a simple answer, but I'm just trying to be me. And that's probably what I've realized is the hardest thing to do for me personally, is shed off a lot of layers, because I know that if I'm the best, kind of most refined version of myself, I'm going to be proudest of who I am, and I know I'm going to do the most I can for this world and leave a legacy that I'll be proud of to my kids and the people I've helped.
Do you have a specific, what are you going to do? Like, is there a goal?
I know I'm very clear on that.
Okay.
I mean, currently kind of going through a master's in neuroscience, and I'd like to get a PhD. I would like to incorporate teaching, be it at a postdoctorate level or even to chiropractors in general. I love working with chiropractors. And I've always had the vision of making our practice the most kind of comprehensive, state-of-the-art, most results-driven practice in all of Canada.
Bang. I love that goal. Not small.
No, it's not.
Big
but
goal.
It's doable.
It's
doable.
Your use of language is really good. So the very last question on your hero's journey, that big goal, what compels you to keep going?
It's a good question. I think just because somebody's got to do it. I know that sounds silly, but
there's a need.
There's a need, and if I don't do it, somebody might not do it. So I might as well do it and be proud of what I've done.
I honestly love that answer. Well, Graham, I really appreciate it. Thank you very much for being on the show.
Thank you.
And I'll see you next Monday for my Snap, Crackle, Pop.
See you next Monday.
All right, buddy.